The stomach cramps hit me like a freight train at 3 in the morning, doubling me over the bathroom tile as my insides twisted and burned. I pressed my forehead against the cool porcelain, gasping through another wave of nausea that left me trembling and drenched in cold sweat. This was the 4th time this month I'd woken up like this, my body rebelling against something I couldn't identify. I am grateful you are here with me. Before we begin, I would really love to know where you are watching from. Comment your city below. Now let me tell you about something that changed my life forever. My fingers gripped the edge of the sink as I pulled myself upright, staring at the hollow-eyed reflection in the mirror. Dark circles shadowed my brown skin, and my usually full cheeks had grown gaunt over the past few months. I'd lost 23 pounds without trying, my clothes hanging loose on my frame like borrowed garments. The doctors had run every test imaginable, finding nothing wrong with my kidneys, my liver, my digestive system. Clean bill of health, they'd said, even as my body continued its steady decline. I splashed cold water on my face and stumbled back to bed, my legs weak and unsteady. The room spun as I collapsed onto the mattress, pulling the covers tight around my shivering body. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by cramps that made me curl into a fetal position. Morning light filtered through the curtains when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it with shaking hands, squinting at the screen. A text from my daughter-in-law, Bethany. "Good morning. Bringing over breakfast casserole. Be there in 20. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, trying to muster the energy to get dressed. Bethany had been so attentive these past 6 months since my son, Marcus Jr., took that overseas assignment for his company. She'd moved into the house next door, insisting she wanted to help take care of me while he was gone. Sweet girl, I'd thought. Always cooking for me, bringing over meals 3 or 4 times a week, refusing to let me lift a finger. The doorbell rang exactly 20 minutes later. I shuffled downstairs in my robe, gripping the banister to keep myself steady. Through the frosted glass, I could see Bethany's blonde ponytail bobbing as she shifted the casserole dish from one hand to the other. I opened the door, and she breezed past me in a cloud of expensive perfume. "You look terrible," she said, setting the dish on my kitchen counter. "Another bad night?" "Something I ate, probably." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her move through my kitchen with practiced ease. She pulled plates from my cabinet, the same cheerful smile fixed on her face. The casserole steamed as she cut into it, the smell of cheese and eggs making my stomach lurch. She loaded a generous portion onto a plate and thrust it toward me. "Eat up. You need your strength." I carried the plate to the table and sat down, fork hovering over the food. Something gnawed at the back of my mind, a whisper of unease I couldn't quite grasp. Bethany watched me from across the kitchen, her blue eyes tracking my every movement. I set the fork down, my hand trembling slightly. The tremor wasn't just from the nausea anymore. Something had shifted in the air between us, a tension I couldn't name but felt deep in my bones. "Actually, I'm not very hungry right now." I pushed the plate away, watching steam curl up from the eggs. Bethany's smile tightened at the corners. She crossed the kitchen in 3 quick steps, her heels clicking against the tile with sharp, deliberate strikes. Her hand landed on my shoulder, fingers pressing down harder than necessary. "You have to eat, Aaliyah. How else will you get better?" I stood up, shrugging off her grip. My legs wobbled but held. The room tilted slightly as I moved toward the sink, gripping the counter's edge for balance. Through the window above the basin, I could see my reflection. Sunken eyes, graying skin, cheekbones sharper than they'd been in years. When had I lost so much weight? Behind me, Bethany's breathing had changed. Quick, shallow pulls of air that reminded me of an animal cornered. I turned slowly, keeping my back to the counter. She stood in the center of my kitchen, the casserole dish clutched to her chest like a shield. Her knuckles had gone white around the ceramic edges. "I need to lie down," I said, moving toward the hallway. She blocked my path, stepping sideways to cut me off. The dish clattered onto the table as she spread her arms wide, forcing me to either push past her or retreat. "Let me help you upstairs. You're so weak." I stepped back instead, my hip colliding with the counter. Pain radiated through my side, sharp and immediate. Bethany advanced, closing the distance I'd created. Her perfume overwhelmed my senses now. Floral and cloying, mixing with the cheese smell until my stomach heaved. I lurched past her, shouldering through her outstretched arms. My slipper caught on the threshold between kitchen and hallway. I stumbled, catching myself on the wall, my palm slapping against the family photos hanging there. Marcus Jr.'s wedding picture rattled in its frame. "I'm fine, really. I just need rest." The words came out breathless, unconvincing even to my own ears. I hauled myself up the stairs, gripping the railing so hard my joints ached. Each step felt like climbing a mountain. Behind me, Bethany's footsteps followed, slower but persistent. I made it to my bedroom and pushed the door closed, pressing my weight against it. The lock clicked into place. Through the wood, I heard her breathing on the other side, steady and patient. "Call me if you need anything," she said finally. Her footsteps retreated down the hallway. I collapsed onto my bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The ceiling fan spun in lazy circles overhead, and I focused on counting the rotations, trying to slow my racing pulse. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. The house settled into silence. When my legs felt stronger, I crept back downstairs. The casserole still sat on the table, congealing now, a skin forming over the eggs. I grabbed it, carried it to the trash can, and flipped open the lid. My hand hovered over the opening. Instead, I set it on the counter and retrieved a plastic container from the cabinet. I spooned a portion into it, sealed the lid tight, and shoved it to the back of my refrigerator behind the orange juice and wilted lettuce. The rest went into the trash, dish and all, buried under coffee grounds and yesterday's newspaper. My phone sat on the charging dock by the microwave. I picked it up, scrolling through my contacts until I found my cousin Terrence's name. He worked at the health department, ran the food safety division. My finger hovered over the call button. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed proof that would stand up to scrutiny, evidence that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia or confusion. The sample in my refrigerator was a start, but one contaminated dish could be explained away as an accident. The next morning, I waited until I heard Bethany's car pull out of the driveway. She'd mentioned something about grocery shopping, her voice honey-sweet as always. Through the front window, I watched her silver sedan disappear around the corner, then counted to 60 before moving. My son's house sat just 2 blocks away. I'd walked this route 1,000 times before the dizzy spells started. Now each crack in the sidewalk felt like a trap waiting to catch my toe. The morning air was thick with humidity, pressing against my skin like a damp towel. Sweat gathered at my temples despite the slow pace. The spare key still hung on the hook behind their decorative rain gauge. My fingers fumbled with the lock, the metallic scrape seeming loud enough to alert the entire neighborhood. The door swung open, revealing the pristine interior of their kitchen. Everything gleamed. Granite countertops wiped spotless, stainless steel appliances reflecting my distorted image back at me. I moved to their pantry first. Rows of canned goods stood at attention, labels facing forward with military precision. My hands shook as I checked expiration dates. Everything current. Fresh. Nothing expired. The refrigerator told the same story. Milk dated for next week. Yogurt still good for 10 days. Vegetables crisp in their drawer. The basement stairs beckoned. Bethany had mentioned storing extra supplies down there. Her backup pantry, she called it. I gripped the railing with both hands, testing each step before committing my full weight. The wood creaked beneath me. Concrete walls closed in as I descended, the temperature dropping with each step. A second refrigerator hummed in the corner, an older model with a handle that required real strength to open. Inside, plastic containers were stacked 3 deep. I pulled one out, checked the masking tape label on top. My name, written in Bethany's careful script. The date showed 2 weeks ago. The contents looked like chicken soup. I cracked the lid, and the smell hit me immediately. Sour, wrong, the distinct tang of spoilage masked by heavy seasoning. My stomach lurched. I sealed it again and checked another container. More soup, this one labeled from last month. The expiration reality was impossible to miss once I knew what to look for. Behind the containers sat commercial-sized jars of expired broths and sauces, the kind restaurants discarded. Price tags showed they'd come from a discount liquidation store across town. I recognized the logo, a place that specialized in selling damaged and outdated goods at rock-bottom prices. Footsteps sounded above me. Heavy ones. Not Bethany's light tread. I froze, every muscle locked in place. The containers in my hands felt like bricks of evidence. Whoever was upstairs moved through the kitchen, cabinet doors opening and closing. A male voice hummed something off-key. My son. Home from work early, or maybe he'd never left. Panic squeezed my chest. I couldn't explain being here, down in their basement, rifling through their supplies. The stairs offered no escape route. I'd have to pass directly through the kitchen to reach the door. The humming stopped. Silence pressed down from above, heavier than any sound. Then footsteps again, moving toward the basement door. The knob rattled. I shoved the containers back into the refrigerator and pressed myself against the wall behind a metal shelving unit. Dust tickled my nose. Paint cans and old Christmas decorations surrounded me, creating a maze of shadows. The basement door opened, light spilling down the stairs. Mom? My son's voice echoed off the concrete. That you down there? My heart hammered so hard I was certain he could hear it from the top of the stairs. I held my breath, counted the seconds. 5, 10, 15. Weird, he muttered. The door clicked shut again. I waited another 5 minutes before moving, my legs cramping from the awkward position. When I finally emerged from behind the shelves, I grabbed my phone and photographed everything. The containers, the labels, the expired commercial products, the liquidation store pricing. The camera clicked softly with each shot. The return trip up the stairs took twice as long. My knees protested each lift, bones grinding together like broken glass. At the top, I pressed my ear to the door. Water ran somewhere in the house. A shower, maybe. I slipped through the kitchen and out the front door, replacing the key with trembling fingers. The walk home stretched endlessly. Each house I passed a potential witness. By the time I reached my own porch, my shirt was soaked through with sweat and my vision swam with dark spots. Inside, I transferred the photos to my laptop, creating a backup folder buried 3 levels deep in my documents. Then I called Terrence. I need that food tested, I said when he answered. Today, if possible. The laboratory sat in a strip mall between a nail salon and a check cashing place. I pushed through the glass door, the bell overhead jingling against my nerves. Chemical smells hit me first. Bleach mixed with something metallic and sharp. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly blue-white glow. A young woman behind the counter glanced up from her computer, her eyebrows raised. I pulled the containers from my purse, setting them on the scratched laminate surface one by one. The yogurt, the applesauce, the mystery casserole wrapped in aluminum foil. "I need these tested for contamination," I said. "Bacterial growth, mold, anything harmful?" She typed something into her computer without touching the containers. "Standard testing runs about $300. Results in 5 to 7 business days." My stomach dropped. $300. My pension check wouldn't stretch that far. But I thought of the cramping. The nights spent doubled over the toilet. The weight I'd lost without meaning to. "How much for a rush?" I asked. $500, 2 days. I pulled out my credit card, the one I kept for emergencies. The machine beeped as it processed. The woman handed me a receipt and a claim ticket, then used gloved hands to transfer my samples into labeled bags. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down on the cracked pavement. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. $500. If I was wrong about this, if the food came back clean, I'd thrown away money I didn't have on paranoid suspicions. My phone buzzed. A text from my son. "Mom, you feeling okay? Haven't heard from you in a few days." I stared at the message. 3 days ago, I would have called him immediately, chatted about nothing for an hour. Now my finger hovered over the delete button. Instead, I typed, "Just tired. Getting plenty of rest." The drive home took me past their house. I slowed without meaning to, scanning the windows. Her car sat in the driveway, the silver sedan catching the light. A flicker of movement in the kitchen window made me accelerate, my tires squealing slightly on the turn. At home, I pulled out the photographs on my laptop again. Zoomed in on the labels, the dates, the stacks of containers. My printer whirred to life, spitting out copies. I arranged them on my dining room table, creating a timeline. January through March. A steady stream of expired goods. The earliest date I could confirm was October of last year. 6 months, possibly longer. I opened my medical file folder, pulling out the records from my doctor visits. February, stomach issues. March, increased symptoms, blood work ordered. April, follow-up appointment scheduled. I laid these alongside the photographs, matching dates to purchases. The pattern emerged like a bruise spreading under skin. Every time I'd eaten at their house, symptoms had worsened within 24 hours. The weeks I'd traveled to visit my sister in Atlanta, I'd felt fine. The month my son had been away on a business trip and I hadn't seen his wife, no symptoms at all. My hands shook as I paperclipped everything together. Evidence. Real, tangible evidence. A knock at my front door made me jump. I gathered the papers quickly, shoving them into a drawer. Through the peephole, I saw my neighbor from 3 houses down, holding a casserole dish. I opened the door just wide enough to see her clearly. She smiled, her teeth too white against her lipstick. "Made too much lasagna," she said, extending the dish. "Thought you might want some." The smell of tomatoes and cheese wafted up. My stomach turned. I thought of all the times I'd accepted food from my daughter-in-law's hands, never questioning, always grateful. "That's kind, but I'm actually on a special diet right now," I said. "Doctor's orders." Her smile faltered. "Oh, well, I hope you feel better." I closed the door and locked both bolts. The sound of her footsteps retreating down my porch steps faded into silence. Through the window, I watched her walk back up the street, still carrying the casserole dish. That night, I lay awake counting ceiling cracks, 47 of them spreading from the corners like spider webs. My phone sat on the nightstand, dark and silent. No calls from my son, no texts from his wife with dinner invitations. The waiting felt like drowning in slow motion. I couldn't wait any longer. At 7 in the morning, I loaded everything into my car, the food samples in labeled bags, my printed research, the medication log, the calendar marked with every visit to their house. The evidence filled an entire cardboard box that I secured in the passenger seat. My son's house sat 20 minutes across town, a colonial with blue shutters that his wife had insisted on painting herself. I'd helped her that summer 3 years ago, laughing as we splattered paint on the drop cloths. The memory tasted like vinegar now. Both cars were in the driveway. Good. I needed them both present for this. I rang the doorbell 3 times. Hard. The box felt heavy in my arms, corners digging into my forearms. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, I saw movement, a shadow approaching. My son opened the door in his work clothes, tie already knotted. His eyes widened when he saw the box. "Mom, it's 7 in the morning. I need to show you something." I pushed past him into the foyer. "Where is she?" "Who? Vanessa? She's getting ready for work." He closed the door, confusion creasing his forehead. "What's going on?" I set the box on their dining room table with a thud that made their hanging light fixture sway. Glass containers clinked together. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made me turn. Vanessa appeared, her hair wet from the shower, mascara wand still in her hand. She froze on the bottom step when she saw me. Our eyes locked. For just a second, maybe less, something flickered across her face. Recognition. Fear. Then it vanished behind a practiced smile. "Aaliyah! What a surprise! Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "No." I turned to the box and started pulling out containers. "I want to show you both something." I lined them up on the polished wood surface. The yogurt, the chicken, the bread with its green spots visible through the plastic, the milk. Each item labeled with the date I'd received it, the date I'd checked the expiration, and the symptoms I'd experienced afterward. My son picked up the yogurt container, squinting at my handwriting. Vanessa hadn't moved from the staircase. "Mom, what is this?" I pulled out the printed articles next, spreading them across the table like a hand of cards. "This is evidence that your wife has been poisoning me." The words hung in the air. Vanessa's mascara wand clattered to the hardwood floor. My son's face went pale, then red. "That's insane," Vanessa said. She descended the remaining steps slowly, each footfall deliberate. "You can't be serious." I pulled out my medication log. "Every time I ate food from this house, I got sick. Every single time. And every time I checked what you'd given me, it was expired. Weeks passed. Sometimes months." My son was reading the articles now, his jaw working. Vanessa moved toward the table, her wet hair leaving dark spots on her blouse. She reached for the yogurt container, but I grabbed her wrist. "Don't touch it." She yanked her arm back, and I saw it then, the mask slipping. My eyes went hard, lips pressing into a thin line. "You've always been paranoid," she said, "looking for reasons to drive a wedge between us." "Show me your refrigerator." I moved toward the kitchen, but Vanessa stepped into my path. We stood inches apart. I could smell her shampoo, something fruity and artificial. "You're not going through my house making accusations." "Then you show me, right now. Pull out your milk, your yogurt, your lunch meat. Let's check the dates together." My son set down the papers. "Vanessa, Just show her. This is crazy, but we can clear it up in 2 seconds. She didn't move. I pushed past her shoulder, and she grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. Her fingers dug into my bicep, nails biting through my jacket sleeve. Get out of my house! I wrenched my arm free and stumbled backward into the hallway wall. The impact rattled a framed wedding photo, their perfect smiles mocking me from behind glass. My shoulder throbbed where it had hit the corner of a decorative shelf. Mom, wait! My son moved between us, his hands raised like a referee, but I was already moving, shoving past him toward the kitchen. My sneakers squeaked on the tile as I yanked open the refrigerator door with such force that bottles rattled in the door compartments. The light spilled across my face, cold air hitting my flushed cheeks. I grabbed the milk carton first. The date swam before my eyes as I twisted it toward the overhead light. February 8th, 3 weeks ago. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Behind me, I heard Vanessa's sharp intake of breath. I set the milk on the granite counter with a heavy thunk and reached back in. The deli turkey came next, slimy to the touch through its plastic wrap. January 30th. Then cream cheese, the foil wrapper torn and resealed with tape. December 15th. I lined them up like evidence at a crime scene, each container a small monument to my suffering. This doesn't prove anything, Vanessa said, but her voice had changed, higher, thinner. She'd moved to the kitchen doorway, blocking it with her body. I pulled out a yogurt container, same brand she'd given me last week. The date was smudged, deliberately rubbed until barely legible, but I could make out enough, January something. My stomach churned at the memory of spooning it into my mouth, trusting her completely. You smudged this one. I held it up, turning it so the overhead pendant light caught the blurred numbers. Why would you do that, unless you knew? My son had gone white. He picked up the turkey package, staring at it like it was something from another planet. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. For a moment, I thought he might be sick right there on his pristine kitchen floor. I kept digging through the refrigerator. Cottage cheese, sour cream, a half-empty jar of pasta sauce with visible mold creeping around the rim despite the lid being screwed tight. Each item went onto the growing pile. The granite counter became a toxic landscape of rot and negligence. My fingers felt contaminated just from touching the containers. We're busy people, Vanessa said. She'd crossed her arms over her chest, defensive now instead of angry. Sometimes things get pushed to the back. We forget to clean out the fridge. Everyone does it. Everyone doesn't feed it to their mother-in-law. I slammed the refrigerator door. The entire appliance shuddered, magnets sliding down its surface. Everyone doesn't specifically choose these items to pack up and send home with someone. That takes effort. That takes planning. I opened the freezer next. Ice crystals dusted my face as I pulled out a frozen lasagna. The cardboard was soft with freezer burn, the cellophane window showing gray meat and crystallized cheese. Best by date, September 2022, over a year and a half ago. My vision blurred at the edges. That's been in there forever, Vanessa said quickly. We never eat it. That's why it's still there. You gave me one just like it 3 months ago. I turned to face her fully, the frozen block heavy in my hands. Told me you'd made too many. Insisted I take it home. I was in the ER for 6 hours after eating half of it. My son's phone clattered to the floor. He didn't pick it up. His eyes moved between his wife and me like he was watching a tennis match, trying to keep up with impossible volleys. A vein pulsed in his temple, visible even from across the kitchen. I dropped the lasagna onto the counter. It landed with a solid thud that echoed through the silent house. My legs felt unsteady beneath me. The overhead lights seemed too bright suddenly, making dark spots dance in my peripheral vision. I gripped the counter edge to steady myself. "How long have you been doing this?" My voice came out rougher than intended. "Since the beginning? Since we moved here to be closer to you?" Vanessa's face had changed. The defensive mask had cracked, revealing something harder underneath. Her jaw clenched and unclenched in a rhythmic tick. She twisted her wedding ring around and around her finger, the diamond catching the light with each rotation. "You want to know?" She took a step forward, and I instinctively took one back. "Fine. Want to know why? You moved here without asking. Just showed up and expected us to revolve our lives around you. Dinner twice a week. Babysitting your feelings. Listening to stories about Dad we've heard 1,000 times." The words hit like physical blows. I pressed harder against the counter, feeling the granite edge cut into my palms. My breath came shallow and quick. The kitchen seemed to tilt sideways. "So you poisoned me." The words hung in the air between us. "You systematically made me sick because you couldn't just tell me to back off." My son finally moved. He stepped forward, putting himself between us again, but this time facing his wife. His shoulders were rigid, hands balled into fists at his sides. I could see the muscles working in his jaw as he ground his teeth together. The room spun as another wave of nausea rolled through my stomach. I pressed my back against the counter, feeling sweat break out across my forehead despite the air conditioning. My vision blurred at the edges. The argument happening in front of me sounded distant, muffled, as if I was underwater. I bent forward, hands on my knees, trying to control the violent churning in my gut. Saliva flooded my mouth. The tile floor beneath me seemed to shift and ripple. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the urge to vomit right there in their pristine kitchen. When I opened them again, my son had grabbed his wife's arm. Not violently, but firmly. She wrenched away from him, backing toward the pantry door. Her eyes were wild now, darting between us like a cornered animal. The careful composure she always maintained had completely shattered. "Don't touch me, Trevor." Her voice came out sharp and brittle. "My son. Trevor." I watched him run both hands through his hair, the gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. He'd done that same motion as a boy when struggling with homework, as a teenager caught breaking curfew on his wedding day while waiting at the altar. Now he stood in his own kitchen, hands trembling, staring at his wife like she was a stranger. I pushed myself upright, though it took considerable effort. My legs felt like rubber. Another cramp seized my intestines, and I had to breathe through it, counting slowly to 10. The expired dairy, the rancid oils, the moldy bread I'd consumed for months. All of it was still working through my system, still wreaking havoc. "I need to sit down." The words came out weaker than I intended. Trevor moved immediately, guiding me toward one of the kitchen chairs. His hand on my elbow was gentle but urgent. I sank into it gratefully, feeling the hard wood support my weight. My head felt too heavy for my neck. Vanessa hadn't moved from her position by the pantry. She stood perfectly still now, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. Her arms were crossed tightly across her chest. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence, each second stretching impossibly long. "I'm calling Dr. Chen." Trevor already had his phone out, fingers moving across the screen. "No." I reached out, catching his wrist. My grip was weaker than it should have been. I need answers first. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw fear flash across his face. My skin probably had that grayish cast I'd noticed in the mirror lately. The dark circles under my eyes. The hollow cheeks from losing 15 pounds over the past few months. I'd attributed it all to grief, to age, to the natural decline of a woman approaching 50. Never to deliberate poisoning. Trevor pulled away gently and continued dialing. He turned his back to both of us, phone pressed to his ear. His free hand gripped the back of his neck, knuckles white with tension. I focused on Vanessa again. She hadn't moved, but something in her posture had shifted. The defiance was still there, but underneath it, I detected something else. Panic, maybe, or calculation. She uncrossed her arms and smoothed down her shirt, a nervous gesture that made her look almost vulnerable. "Did you want me to die?" The question came out flat, emotionless. I was too exhausted for anger now. Too sick. She flinched. "No, I wanted you to feel how I felt. Uncomfortable, unwelcome, wrong in my own space." Trevor's voice rose behind me, urgent and clipped as he spoke to someone on the phone. Medical terminology I didn't quite catch. I kept my eyes on my daughter-in-law, watching her face cycle through emotions. Regret, resentment, fear, defiance, all in the span of seconds. Another cramp doubled me over. This one was worse, sharp and twisting. I gasped, clutching my abdomen. Sweat soaked through my shirt. The room tilted dangerously. Trevor's hand was suddenly on my shoulder, his voice loud in my ear, but I couldn't make out the words over the roaring in my head. My vision tunneled. The bright kitchen lights became distant stars. The floor rushed up to meet me, and I realized dimly that I was falling. Trevor caught me, his arms strong around my shoulders, lowering me the rest of the way down. The cold tile pressed against my cheek. It felt good against my fevered skin. Footsteps thundered around me. Vanessa's voice, high and panicked now, cutting through the fog. Trevor's hands checking my pulse, his medical training kicking in despite his emotional state. I tried to speak, to tell him I was okay, but my tongue felt too thick for my mouth. The world faded to gray, then black, then back to gray again. Time became elastic, meaningless. At some point, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Bright lights, strange hands touching me, professional and impersonal. A blood pressure cuff tightening around my arm, the squeak of a stretcher being rolled across tile. I fought to stay conscious, to keep track of what was happening. Trevor's face appeared above me, ashen and terrified. His lips were moving, but I couldn't hear him. Behind him, Vanessa stood frozen in the doorway, one hand covering her mouth, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The ceiling moved above me as they wheeled me out. Trevor walked alongside the stretcher, still talking, still holding my hand. His grip was desperate, crushing my fingers. I tried to squeeze back, but couldn't manage it. The hospital ceiling tiles blurred past, one after another, a flickering sequence of white squares and fluorescent lights. My body jostled with each bump as the paramedics rushed me through automatic doors. The smell hit me, antiseptic and floor wax, and something underneath that spoke of illness and fear. My stomach lurched again, but there was nothing left to expel. Cold air blasted from overhead vents as they wheeled me into the ER. Voices shouted medical jargon I couldn't process. Someone inserted an IV into my arm with a sharp sting. I watched the needle slide under my skin, fascinated by the ribbon of blood that curled back into the tubing before clear fluid began flowing. Trevor's hand disappeared from mine. A nurse in purple scrubs stepped between us, her expression all business as she checked monitors and asked rapid-fire questions. I tried to answer, but my words came out slurred, disconnected. She wrote something on a clipboard and moved away. The stretcher jerked to a stop in a curtained bay. Hands pulled at my clothes, stripping away my cardigan, unbuttoning my blouse. The exposure made me shiver. Someone draped a thin hospital gown over me, barely bothering with the ties. They pressed electrodes to my chest, cold adhesive circles that monitored the erratic beating of my heart. A doctor appeared, young and efficient, his jaw tight with concentration. He shined a light in my eyes, first one, then the other. The brightness pierced straight through to the back of my skull. He palpated my abdomen with firm fingers, pressing in a systematic pattern. When he hit the lower right quadrant, I gasped, my back arching off the bed. Need full toxicology panel CBC, metabolic, liver function, he said to someone I couldn't see. Get a sample to the lab stat. More blood drawn from my other arm. I watched the vials fill, dark red and somehow wrong-looking. The phlebotomist worked with practiced speed, her movements economical and precise. She labeled each tube with a marker that squeaked against the plastic. Through the gap in the curtain, I caught sight of Vanessa pacing in the hallway. She'd stopped crying. Her face had gone carefully blank, that mask she wore so well sliding back into place. She was on her phone, thumbs flying across the screen, texting someone, deleting messages. Her eyes darted left and right, checking to see who might be watching. My pulse hammered in my throat. Even through the fog of illness, clarity broke through in sharp fragments. She wasn't texting Trevor. He was right here somewhere. Who then? Her hands trembled as she typed, and that tremor told me everything. She was covering her tracks, getting her story straight. A nurse returned with a plastic basin and held it while my body convulsed again. Nothing came up but bile and acid that burned my throat raw. She wiped my mouth with a damp cloth, her touch gentle despite the urgency surrounding us. The basin clinked as she set it on the tray beside me. Mrs. Morrison? The doctor's voice cut through the haze. Can you tell me what you ate today? I opened my mouth, but Trevor's voice answered from somewhere beyond my line of sight. She had breakfast at our house. Vanessa made it. Eggs, toast, juice. The doctor's pen scratched against paper. What time was that? Around 9 this morning. Trevor moved into view, his face haggard under the harsh lighting. He'd aged 10 years in the past hour. She started feeling sick around 3. 6 hours. The timeline clicked into place in my fevered brain. 6 hours for whatever poison Vanessa had served me to work its way through my system. I wanted to scream it, to tell them all what she'd done, but my tongue felt thick and useless. The doctor pressed his stethoscope to my chest, then my back, listening with furrowed concentration. His expression gave nothing away, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't liking what he heard. I need you admitted for observation, he said, finally meeting my eyes. Your vitals are unstable, and we need to determine what's causing this. Behind him, through the curtain, Vanessa had stopped pacing. She stood perfectly still now, phone clutched in both hands, watching the medical staff move around my bed. Her face showed concern, just the right amount. Not too much, not too little. She'd practiced that look, perfected it over months of slowly poisoning me. My hands clenched into fists against the scratchy hospital sheets. Rage burned through the weakness, hot and clarifying. She thought she'd won, thought she'd gotten away with it. But my body had expelled the evidence into that toilet bowl at their house. Trevor had seen it, and now these doctors would find the truth in my blood, in the numbers that would show up on those lab results. A orderly arrived to wheel me upstairs. The hallway lights streaked past as we moved, a continuous ribbon of brightness that made my head throb. We turned a corner, and Vanessa's face appeared above me, her hand reaching out to touch my shoulder. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking perfectly. "I'm so sorry you're sick." I jerked away from her touch, the movement violent enough to make the monitors beep in alarm. The orderly paused, looking between us. Vanessa's hand hung in the air for a moment before she lowered it slowly, her mask slipping for just a fraction of a second. I saw what lay beneath: calculation, fear, and something darker that made my blood run cold despite the fever. The elevator doors closed between us. Trevor stood beside me, his hand finding mine again. He stared straight ahead at the brushed metal doors, jaw working. He knew. Maybe he didn't want to believe it yet, but the knowledge sat between us like a living thing, growing larger with each floor we ascended. The hospital room on the 5th floor smelled of antiseptic and stale air from the ventilation system. A nurse whose badge read Patricia hung a new IV bag, the plastic crackling as she worked. I watched her efficient movements, cataloging every detail with a clarity that surprised me. The fever had broken during the elevator ride, leaving me exhausted but alert. Trevor stood by the window, silhouette dark against the afternoon light streaming through the blinds. His shoulders curved inward, the posture of a man carrying weight he never expected to bear. I could see his reflection in the glass, eyes fixed on something in the distance, jaw clenched so tight the muscle jumped. Patricia finished with the IV and checked my vitals one last time. Her fingers pressed against my wrist, counting my pulse with professional detachment. She made notes on her tablet, the stylus tapping against the screen in quick succession. "The doctor will be in shortly with your results," she said, then left without waiting for a response. The door clicked shut. Trevor turned from the window, finally meeting my eyes. He moved to the chair beside my bed, lowering himself slowly like an old man. His hands hung between his knees, fingers interlaced, knuckles white. "I found the containers," he said. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. "In the back of the pantry, 3 dozen jars, boxes, packages, all expired, some by years." My breath caught. I'd suspected, felt the truth in my bones during those long months of increasing illness, but hearing it confirmed made the room tilt sideways. I gripped the bed rail, metal cold and solid under my palm. "She had a system," Trevor continued, his voice hollow. "Fresh groceries would come in. She'd swap the dates, store the new stuff in the garage fridge, and bring out the old. I found her notebook, too. Dates, quantities, your symptoms, all documented like a science experiment." The IV drip marked time in the corner of my vision. Drip, drip, drip. Each drop a moment of my life she'd stolen, each one a deliberate choice to harm me. "Where is she now?" My voice came out stronger than I expected, edged with steel I hadn't known I still possessed. "Waiting downstairs. I told her I needed time alone with you." He rubbed his face with both hands, the sound of palm against stubble loud in the quiet room. "She asked me to bring her coffee. Actually asked. Like this is just another hospital visit." The door opened again. Dr. Chen entered carrying a tablet, his expression grave. He was younger than I'd expected, mid-30s, with wire-rimmed glasses that caught the overhead lights. He pulled up a rolling stool and sat, positioning himself at eye level with me. Mrs. Morrison, your blood work shows elevated levels of bacterial toxins consistent with chronic food poisoning. He swiped through screens, turning the tablet so I could see the highlighted numbers. Red flags marked most of the columns. Your liver enzymes are concerning. Kidney function is compromised. You're severely malnourished despite, your son tells me, eating regular meals. I looked at Trevor. His face had gone gray, skin stretched tight across his cheekbones. Dr. Chen continued scrolling. Given the pattern and duration of exposure Mr. Morrison described, this appears to be intentional poisoning. I'm legally required to report this to the authorities. The room went very still. Outside, a helicopter passed overhead, the thump of rotors vibrating through the window glass. Trevor stood abruptly, pacing to the wall and back, energy suddenly electric in his movements. Do it, I said. Report everything. Dr. Chen nodded once, made notes on his tablet. I'll need to keep you for observation. Minimum 72 hours. We need to flush your system, restore your nutritional balance, monitor for organ damage. He left to make the necessary calls. Trevor returned to the window, forehead pressed against the cool glass. His breath fogged the pane in small circles that expanded and contracted with each exhale. She's going to come up here eventually, he said, when I don't come back down. I shifted in the bed, ignoring the pull of the IV in my arm. My body felt lighter somehow, despite the weakness. The truth was out. The poisoning documented. The authorities being called. After months of second-guessing myself, wondering if I was paranoid or cruel for suspecting her, the validation settled over me like armor. Let her come! Trevor turned, surprise flickering across his face. I met his gaze steadily. I want to see her face when they tell her, when she realizes she documented her own crimes in that notebook, when she understands that her performance downstairs fooled no one. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, multiple sets moving with purpose. Through the narrow window in the door, I saw 2 uniformed officers approaching, a woman in a detective suit between them. Dr. Chen walked beside them, pointing toward my room. The detective entered first. She was tall, mid-40s, with short gray hair and observant eyes that swept the room in one efficient glance. Her badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. Detective Sarah Barnes. Mrs. Morrison, I'm here about the report Dr. Chen filed. She pulled out a small recording device. Are you able to give a statement? I pushed myself more upright, accepting the discomfort as a small price. The detective positioned herself where I could see her clearly without straining. Trevor moved closer to the bed, his hand finding my shoulder this time, the touch protective rather than comforting. My daughter-in-law has been poisoning me for 8 months, I said. Each word came out clear, deliberate. I have evidence, dates, symptoms, patterns. Block 1010. 6 months later, I stood in my new kitchen, sunlight pouring through windows I'd chosen myself. The apartment was smaller than the house I'd shared with Michael all those years, but every surface belonged to me alone. I ran my fingers along the granite countertop, cool and smooth under my touch, then opened the refrigerator. Fresh vegetables lined the crisper drawer, their colors vibrant. Deep purple eggplant, bright red peppers, leafy green kale. I checked each expiration date out of habit, though I'd bought everything myself yesterday. The coffee maker gurgled, filling the space with rich aroma. Real Colombian beans, ground fresh that morning. I poured a cup, inhaling deeply before taking the first sip. No bitterness coating my tongue, no metallic aftertaste, no nausea churning in my stomach 30 minutes later. Just coffee. My phone buzzed on the counter. Trevor's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, the third call this week I'd ignored. The divorce papers had been served 2 months ago. He'd tried explaining, justifying, pleading through text messages and voice notes. How he hadn't known the full extent. How he'd been manipulated too. How his mother was receiving psychiatric help now. How she'd confessed everything during the trial proceedings. I deleted the voicemail without listening. The journal sat on my bookshelf now, sealed in a clear evidence bag that the prosecutor's office had returned after the sentencing. Life in prison, the judge had declared. Attempted murder with premeditation. The notebook had contained everything. Purchase receipts for expired goods from discount bins. Careful notations about my declining health. Even calculations about life insurance policies. She'd documented her own methodical destruction of me. Perhaps as proof of her cleverness, or maybe she'd truly believed she'd never be caught. I carried my coffee to the balcony, stepping into October sunshine. 4 stories below, the city moved through its Saturday morning rhythm. A woman jogged past with her dog, both moving with easy synchronization. Across the street, a father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, her laughter carrying upward on the breeze. Normal people living normal lives, untouched by the kind of calculated malice I'd survived. My reflection caught in the sliding glass door. 47 years old, 20 pounds heavier than 6 months ago. Color returned to my skin. Clarity restored to my eyes. The hollow-cheeked ghost who'd stared back from hospital mirrors had been replaced by someone I recognized. Someone who'd fought her way back from the edge of a grave someone else had been digging. The gym membership card sat in my wallet now, used 4 times a week. I'd started with gentle yoga, my body relearning strength it had lost during months of systematic poisoning. Now I could hold plank position for 90 seconds, could run 2 miles without stopping, could feel muscle definition returning to arms that had grown frighteningly thin. Tuesday afternoons, I met with Dr. Patricia Wells, the therapist whose office overlooked a small garden. We talked about trust, about rebuilding, about recognizing red flags I'd ignored, about how love, even for a son, couldn't excuse becoming complicit in your own destruction. You saved yourself, she'd told me during our last session. That matters. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, placed it in the dishwasher that I'd loaded myself with dishes I'd eaten from. Food I'd chosen and prepared with my own hands. The simple act of domestic routine felt like victory. My laptop sat on the dining table, open to the support group forum I'd joined. Other survivors shared their stories there. Adult children stealing from elderly parents, spouses conducting financial abuse, family members engaging in medical neglect. I'd posted my story 3 weeks ago, carefully anonymized. The responses had flooded in. Gratitude for sharing. Recognition of similar patterns. Relief at knowing they weren't alone, weren't crazy, weren't wrong to suspect those who claimed to love them. Tomorrow, I started my new position at the accounting firm downtown. Remote work, flexible hours, a manager who'd listened when I'd explained the gap in my employment history without pity or judgment. Just acknowledgement that I'd survived something difficult and was ready to move forward. The evening light shifted, painting my small living room in shades of gold. I'd hung artwork on the walls, bold abstract pieces in blues and greens, nothing subtle or passive. Plants lined the windowsills, thriving under my careful attention. A snake plant, supposedly unkillable. Pothos vines trailing from a hanging basket. Herbs growing in labeled pots on the kitchen windowsill. Basil, oregano, thyme. Things I nurtured that grew healthy under my care. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from my cousin Denise. the only family member who'd believed me from the beginning, who'd visited every week during my hospitalization, who'd helped me move into this apartment, and hadn't asked questions when I'd said Trevor wasn't welcome. "Dinner next weekend? My place. Just us." I typed back immediately. "I'll bring dessert." The chocolate cake recipe bookmarked on my tablet had 5-star reviews. I'd make it from scratch, measuring each ingredient myself, controlling every element that went into my body. Small acts of autonomy that added up to a reclaimed life. Night settled over the city. I turned on lamps, warm light pushing back shadows. No one had keys to this apartment except me. No one could enter my space uninvited, contaminate my food, slip poison into my meals while wearing a mask of concern. The locks were new, heavy-duty deadbolts I'd watched the locksmith install. The security system armed with a code only I knew. I settled onto my couch with a book I'd been wanting to read for months, a thriller about corporate espionage. Fiction felt safe now. Real danger had taught me to appreciate imaginary threats contained within pages I could close whenever I chose. Before sleeping, I stood at my bathroom mirror and met my own gaze. The woman looking back had survived something designed to kill her, had recognized the truth when everyone else had called her paranoid, had gathered evidence when she could barely stand, had fought back when fighting seemed impossible. "You're still here," I said aloud to my reflection. She failed. Tomorrow would bring new routines, new challenges, new moments of rebuilding. But tonight, I was alive, healthy, free, and wholly my own. That was enough. That was everything. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.